Law enforcement authorities say the Sekhukhune District in Limpopo is a major contributor to the country's drug manufacturing and trafficking activities. This after members of the Hawks busted and dismantled the largest drug manufacturing laboratory in the country at a farm just outside of Groblersdal in the Sekhukhune region. 4 suspects, including 2 Mexican nationals, were arrested. More than $100 million worth of chemicals used in the manufacturing of illicit drugs were seized in the raid, which equates to about 2 billion rand in street value. Pierre Gildenhuys, who's the head of forensics investigations at D&K Management Consultants, joins us now live for this conversation. Pierre, it feels like we're all living in another episode of Breaking Bad, except this time it's taking place in Limpopo and not in the capital of Mexico. To what extent does the role of transnational criminal syndicates play a role in such a big bust?
Good evening, Oliver. I think the role that international drug dealers play in this is quite large. I think when you talk of scale and the amount of drugs that were found there, it's not a small operation. It's obviously a very large operation. It's very large scale. And one has to ask that whether or not some of our local drug dealers have the knowledge to handle all of that. And maybe perhaps they need international expertise to help manufacture the drugs. Maybe the international guys are there as a connection into the borders to export it out or to get certain materials in. But definitely, it's the first time that I hear, Mexican, call it cartel drug lords or drug leaders are caught here in the borders of South Africa to do with drugs. But like you say, it's like a series, it's like an episode of what is next. And I don't think you can ever rule it out to be the possibility, but definitely it plays a very, very large role.
Crystal meth is not a cheap drug. It is, as far as street drugs are concerned, on the high end of the drug scale, which means only one thing, that it is for a high-income market. Does that market exist in South Africa, or is this 2 billion rand worth of drug, $100 million worth of crystal meth geared for an export market? If so, what are the channels that typically happens through?
I don't think that every single drug manufactured in any laboratory in South Africa is purely for local consumption. I think drug dealers, whether they are foreign nationals, whether they are South African, have their fingers in many holes, many pies. And I think a large scale of that, especially when you're talking about 2 billion rands worth of narcotics and illicit substances, are discovered. And I don't think less than half of that is for the consumption or use or resell in the local market of drugs. I think it's very close to the borders. I've been to Groblersdal myself. I've been to Denelton a lot in recent. It's very close to the borders. We all know our border control are weak. Frequently we hear of guys being nabbed at OR Tambo. Drugs go through there quite a lot. Obviously other international airports like KZN and Cape Town as well. But I think for the farm in Groblersdal to be situated closest to OR Tambo International, there could be fingers in the pies there. And who's not to say that, we are talking about Mexicans, yeah? Who's not to say that the police are not involved? Who's to say that members of the Hawks are not involved? You can't rule it out. I'm always of the opinion to say give credit where credit is due. It's a big fine for them. It's a big bust for them.
Let's double click on that just for a second, Pierre. How exactly would such an investigation have to play out for this bust to be able to make? I mean, Groblersdal, with all due respect, is very remote from all economic centers. It's quite remote, in the middle of nowhere, some would say. Does it become suspicious when you see 2 Mexicans in a town in the middle of nowhere, or do you ignore it and say, look, maybe these are just tourists in the country? What are the forensics capabilities needed for such a bust to be able to take place in such a remote part of the country?
I don't know whether you would automatically assume a person walking on the street is Mexican or not. You might assume that he's a local or perhaps a tourist. Like you say, I don't know what you're going to be touristing in an area like Groblersdal. Like you say, it is quite remote. I don't think that our legal system, or maybe not the legal system, but our resources are adequate enough to yet say this is what we have and it is sufficient to combat things like this, because as we all know, these drug labs pop up everywhere. One is closed, one pops up again. If you read at how many drug labs just in the past year have been discovered all over South Africa, it's crazy. One a few weeks ago, every
Yeah.
month almost there's a drug lab
Just a
being
question on
discovered.
that. The fact that we're discovering, or that law enforcement authorities, along with crime intelligence, are discovering so many drug labs, does it mean that we're winning the war on drugs by discovering them, or does it mean that it is just an unrelenting industry and that we could never possibly win the war on it? Because as you say, if you shut down one, another one pops up.
I don't think you'll ever win it. I would also say to you that we have to ask ourselves how they got the information to do this bust in the first place. Be it that somebody didn't get their cut of the deal and they had to become a snitch and to say, listen, because I didn't get paid for a deal or because it went sour, I'm now ratting out on you? Or is it truly because that the intelligence that the Hawks had and the methods that they apply were successful? That is yet to be one way or the other. We don't know yet for certain how exactly they
Do we
got
have
to
a
that.
sense, Pierre, about the scale of the problem of international syndicated, organized, large-scale drug trade in South Africa? Do we have a sense of how big it is?
I really don't think so. I think that if a drug lab worth 2 billion rand could operate under our nose for, and I'll put a question mark behind it, for how long? Like I said, kudos, we found it, or they had the intelligence, or maybe they got a tip off, they found it, good for them. But for how long has it been operating, and how long until the next one just replaces it? It's not to say that you close the one door and it will stay shut forever.
Yeah.
One is guaranteed to pop up again. It's a money making business. They're not just going to stop.
Yeah. Pierre, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it.